The laughter came first, sharp and sudden, cutting through the dry air like a whip crack. It rose from the gathered crowd along the dirt road, spilling from open mouths before anyone thought to stop it. A wagon wheel jolted over a stone, the boards creaked, and the bride slipped. In one breath she was seated, veil glowing pale in the sun. In the next, she was falling, skirts twisting, boots scraping helplessly against the wagon's edge. Dust leapt up as she hit the ground, and for a heartbeat the whole town seemed to hold its breath. Then the laughter returned, louder, crueler, feeding on itself. She lay there stunned, cheeks burning hotter than the sun overhead. Her body felt too heavy to move, as if the earth itself had claimed her. The white of her dress was no longer clean, already smudged with brown dust and grit. She could hear whispers mixed with the laughs. Some were sharp, some mocking, others pretending to sound kind while still cutting deep. The word obese was not spoken, but it hung in the air all the same, carried in looks and raised brows, and the way a few people shook their heads. This was supposed to be her wedding day. A day she had dreamed of since she was a girl, back when she believed happiness came easily and love did not need permission. She had woken before dawn, hands shaking as she buttoned her dress, heart thumping with a mix of hope and fear. She had told herself to stand tall, to ignore the stares she had grown used to over the years. She had promised herself that today would be different. Now she was on the ground, laughter raining down on her like stones. The wagon driver pulled on the reins, confused and flustered, not knowing whether to climb down or stay put. The horses stamped, snorting softly, their harnesses jingling. A few women covered their mouths, though their eyes still gleamed with interest. Children snickered until a sharp look from an elder silenced them. No one stepped forward. No one moved to help her, except one man. He had been standing near the fence line, hat low over his eyes, arms crossed as he watched the wagon approach. A rancher by trade, known more for his quiet work than his words, he did not laugh. He did not smile. When she fell, his body shifted before his mind could catch up. His boots left the hard-packed ground, each step steady and sure as he crossed the space between them. She noticed him only when his shadow fell over her. The laughter dulled, as if the air itself had thickened. She tried to push herself up, but her hands slid in the dust, strength failing her. Shame rushed in, heavy and bitter. She wished she could disappear into the earth, wished the wagon had never stopped, wished she had never believed she belonged in a white dress on a day like this. The rancher knelt beside her without a word. Up close he smelled of leather and sun, of horses and open land. His face was weathered, lined by years of wind and worry, but his eyes were steady, not curious, not cruel, just steady. Did not rush her. He did not offer false cheer, simply placed one hand beneath her arm and the other at her back, careful and respectful. Somewhere behind them, someone scoffed. Another person muttered something meant to sound like a joke. The bride's throat tightened. She expected the man to hesitate, to realize her weight, to pull away in embarrassment. That had happened before, in smaller moments she still remembered too well. He did not pull away. With a deep breath he lifted. Not roughly, not with show, but with the kind of strength that comes from long days of real work. She felt herself rising, felt the ground leave her boots. For an instant she was certain he would falter. Instead he stood, holding her as if she weighed no more than the bundles of hay he moved each morning. The laughter died completely then, replaced by a silence so thick it rang in her ears. She clutched at his shirt, stunned, afraid to look at the faces around her. Her heart pounded hard enough to hurt. When her boots touched the ground again, she swayed, dizzy and overwhelmed. He kept one hand on her arm until she found her balance. Only then did he turn to face the crowd. The town had always been quick to judge. People here noticed everything. Who came from where, who married whom, who gained weight, who lost standing. Stories traveled faster than the river in spring, growing sharper with every telling. The bride had felt those stories wrap around her for years, tightening slowly until she could hardly breathe. She had learned to smile through it, to pretend it did not hurt. But now all eyes were on the rancher. He stood tall, dust on his boots, the bride at his side. The sun caught the edge of his hat, casting his face in half-shadow. No one spoke. Even the horses had gone still. The driver watched him, mouth slightly open. Somewhere a door creaked, as someone leaned out to see what would happen next. The bride's thoughts raced. She wondered who this man thought he was, stepping into her humiliation so boldly. She wondered what he would say. Part of her feared he would try to soften the moment with humor, turning her pain into a lesson or a joke. Another part feared he would say nothing at all, leaving the silence to swallow her whole. She glanced at him, searching his face. His jaw was set, not in anger, but in resolve. He looked like a man who had made a decision and would not back away from it, no matter the cost. She felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, something close to gratitude, something close to hope, though she hardly dared to name it. Her wedding party stood frozen. The groom stared, caught between concern and confusion. This was not how the day was meant to unfold, yet here it was, laid bare before the entire town. The rancher drew in a breath. His fingers tightened briefly on the brim of his hat, then fell to his side. He took one step forward, placing himself fully between the bride and the crowd. The message was clear without a single word spoken. He was not asking permission. He was claiming the moment. The bride's ears rang as she waited. Her heart hammered. She felt every second stretch, felt the weight of every stare. Whatever he was about to say would echo far beyond this dusty road. It would shape how this day was remembered, might even shape how she was seen from this point on. He opened his mouth. Before the first word could leave his lips, a murmur rippled through the crowd, as if they sensed that something was about to change. The murmur did not fade, grew low and uneasy like wind before a storm. The rancher's mouth closed again for a moment, as if he chose patience over haste. The bride felt the tension ripple through his arm, where his hand still hovered near her elbow, ready in case she stumbled again. That small detail steadied her more than she expected. She straightened her shoulders, lifting her chin, even though her knees still trembled beneath the heavy skirts. People began shifting their weight, boots scuffing the dirt. A few faces softened, guilt flickering across them before pride masked it again. Others crossed their arms, daring the man to speak, daring him to challenge what had always been accepted here. The town had rules that were never written down, rules about who belonged and who did not, about what was considered proper and what was laughed at behind cupped hands. The bride knew those rules well. She had learned them early, when whispers followed her down the street, when shopkeepers watched her a second too long, when boys snickered and girls smiled tightly. She had grown into her body faster than others, broader, fuller, carrying weight that seemed to offend people simply by existing. She had learned to work harder, to be kinder, to apologize with her eyes, even when she had done nothing wrong. Her family had told her she was strong, that she had a good heart. They said love would find her because of that. Still, every glance from the crowd now reminded her how fragile those promises felt in moments like this. The rancher finally spoke, but not to the crowd. He leaned closer to her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. He asked if she was hurt. The question was simple, but it caught her off guard. She shook her head, words stuck in her throat. No one had asked her that yet, not truly. He nodded once, as if that was all he needed. Then he turned back toward the onlookers. The silence sharpened. Somewhere in the distance, a screen door slammed. The bride sensed that whatever came next would not be easily forgotten. She felt exposed, standing there with dust on her dress and tears threatening to spill. Yet she also felt seen in a way she had not before. Before the rancher could speak again, an older man stepped forward from the edge of the crowd. His face was familiar to everyone, lined deep with years of authority. He cleared his throat, a sound meant to reclaim control. He said something about accidents happening, about the wagon being old, about everyone needing to move along. His words were meant to smooth things over, to push the moment aside like an inconvenience. The rancher did not look at him. Instead, he scanned the faces one by one, slow and deliberate. The bride followed his gaze. She saw the baker who had once refused to meet her eyes. It's the woman who had smiled kindly to her face but whispered behind her back. The boys who had laughed loudest when she fell. Each look seemed to land with weight. The rancher's presence stirred memories the bride did not expect. She remembered seeing him years ago at the edge of town, fixing a broken fence after a storm, while others stayed inside. She remembered how he had returned a stray calf without asking for thanks, how he spoke little but listened much. He was known, yet somehow distant, like the land he worked, solid, unmoved by opinion. She wondered why he cared now. The wagon driver climbed down at last, wringing his hands, offering apologies that floated uselessly in the air. The bride barely heard him. Her focus remained on the man beside her, on the way his stance shielded her without making her feel small. That was new. That was unsettling. As the moments stretched, the groom finally moved. He stepped closer, face pale, eyes flicking between the bride and the rancher. He asked softly if she was all right. She nodded again, though her heart was still racing. She could sense his discomfort, his fear of how the crowd saw her. It was not anger she felt toward him, but a quiet ache. The town had always had a way of pressing in, shaping people until they fit or broke. A breeze stirred, lifting the edge of her veil. She reached up to steady it, hand still shaking. The rancher noticed and stepped half a pace closer, blocking the wind. It was a small thing, but it spoke louder than words. Whispers began again, different now. Not laughter, but questions. Why was he doing this? What did he mean to say? What would happen if he did? The uncertainty made people uneasy. They preferred their judgments clear and unchallenged. The bride's thoughts drifted to the path that had brought her here, the long hours helping her family, to the quiet evenings spent sewing her own dress because store-bought never fit right, to the moment she had agreed to this marriage, hoping it would bring her a place where she could finally rest. She had believed that love, even if simple, could be enough. Now, standing in the dust, she wondered if love alone could withstand a town's cruelty. The rancher shifted his weight, boots digging into the earth. He looked down briefly, as if grounding himself, then raised his head again. His jaw tightened. Back. The bride sensed he was holding back something strong, something earned through years of watching and waiting. The tension coiled tighter, pulling everyone into its grip. A child's cry broke out somewhere, quickly hushed. The sound seemed too loud in the stillness. The bride's heart thudded harder. She felt the eyes on her body again, measuring, judging. The old shame threatened to rise, familiar and heavy. Then she felt the rancher's hand brush her sleeve, not gripping, just there. It reminded her she was not alone in this moment, no matter how it ended. She drew a steadying breath, the smell of dust and leather filling her lungs. The older man who had spoken earlier opened his mouth again, impatience creeping into his expression. He wanted the spectacle over. He wanted order restored. The rancher finally turned his gaze toward him, and the look he gave made the man pause. It was not anger. It was something colder, firmer. The bride sensed the balance shifting just slightly, not enough to resolve anything, but enough to make the ground feel less certain beneath everyone's feet. She wondered what words could possibly follow this silence. Words had always been used against her, twisted to wound or dismiss. Could they also be used to protect, to confront, to change something that had stood unchallenged for generations? The rancher inhaled slowly. The sound was audible in the quiet, a signal that the waiting was nearly over. The bride's pulse raced. She braced herself, unsure whether what came next would lift her or break her further. The crowd leaned in, breath held. And still, the words had not yet come. The rancher finally spoke, but his voice did not rise. It carried instead, steady and low, the kind that made people quiet because they sensed it mattered. He said nothing sharp at first. He spoke of the road, of how it had claimed many before, with loose boards and hidden stones. He said accidents did not choose their victims. As he spoke, some in the crowd relaxed, thinking the moment would pass without challenge. The bride listened, unsure where his words were leading. Her chest felt tight, each breath careful. She noticed how the groom shifted beside her, hands clenched, eyes darting toward familiar faces. He looked like a man torn between loyalty and fear, between what he felt and what the town expected him to show. The rancher paused, letting the silence settle again. Then his tone changed, not louder, but firmer. He spoke of laughter, of how quickly it came, how easily it was given when someone else fell. He did not point or accuse, yet every word seemed to find its mark. The bride felt heat rush to her face, not from shame this time, but from something closer to anger. She had swallowed that feeling for years. Hearing it named out loud stirred it awake. A woman near the front bristled, lips thinning. A man scoffed under his breath. Others stared at the ground, boots tracing nervous lines in the dirt. The rancher continued, speaking of strength and how it was often misunderstood. He said strength was not about how a body looked, but about how it endured, how it carried burdens unseen. The bride's hands trembled. She had never heard someone speak this way in her defense, especially not in front of everyone who had judged her. It frightened her as much as it comforted her. She wondered what price he would pay for these words later when the crowd dispersed and memories sharpened. The older man stepped forward again, impatience now clear. He said the rancher was making a scene where none was needed. It reminded him of traditions, of keeping order, of not stirring trouble on a wedding day. His voice carried authority built over decades, the weight of custom heavy behind it. The rancher met his gaze calmly. He said tradition did not excuse cruelty. The word hung in the air, startling in its plainness. A ripple of discomfort spread through the onlookers. No one liked to see themselves reflected so clearly. The bride felt a strange pull inside her, a mix of gratitude and fear. She had spent so long avoiding attention that this moment felt dangerous. She wondered if things would be worse after this, if whispers would grow harsher, if doors would quietly close. She glanced at the groom again, searching his face for reassurance, for a sign that he stood with her fully. His expression remained uncertain, and that uncertainty cut deeper than the laughter had. As voices rose and fell around her, the bride's thoughts drifted to her mother, who had warned her that standing out came with a cost. She had hoped marriage would offer shelter, a place where she would not have to fight so hard to be accepted. Now she questioned whether that shelter was real, or just another promise shaped by fear of being alone. The rancher's words continued to stir the crowd. Some nodded almost imperceptibly. Others folded deeper into themselves. A young woman near the back wiped at her eyes, though she quickly looked away when she realized she had been seen. The moment was touching nerves few wanted exposed. The groom finally spoke, his voice shaky. He said this was supposed to be a joyful day. He asked why it had to turn into something heavy. His words were not cruel, but they carried a wish for escape, for the comfort of pretending nothing was wrong. The bride felt the distance between them widen, a gap she had sensed before, but never named. The rancher turned toward him then, not unkindly. He said joy built on silence did not last. He said ignoring pain did not make it disappear. His gaze flicked briefly to the bride, and she felt seen again, truly seen. The look held respect, not pity. A murmur of disagreement rose, met by quieter sounds of agreement. The town felt split down an invisible line, one side clinging to the familiar, the other stirred by something new and unsettling. The bride stood at the center of it, heart pounding, dress heavy with dust and meaning. She wondered if she should speak. The thought terrified her. She had learned that speaking up often made things worse. To get the words pressed against her chest, urgent and aching. She swallowed, unsure if her voice would even come out. Before she could decide, a sudden gust of wind swept down the road, lifting dust and skirts and loose papers. The horses stamped and snorted. The wagon creaked. The interruption broke the tension just enough for people to shift, to breathe. When the dust settled, the moment felt sharper than before. The rancher removed his hat, holding it against his chest. The gesture caught the bride off guard. It felt solemn, almost like a promise. He said there were moments when a town revealed who it truly was. He said this was one of them. The words were not dramatic, but they carried weight. The older man's face flushed. He warned the rancher that stirring trouble had consequences. The implication was clear. Land deals, work, reputation, the things that sustained a man here could be quietly taken away. The bride felt a chill at the thought. She did not want to be the cause of someone else's hardship. She leaned toward the rancher, whispering that he did not have to do this. Her voice was barely audible, but he heard. He shook his head once, a small motion full of resolve. He whispered back that some things were worth standing for, even when it cost. Her breath caught. No one had ever said that to her before. The crowd grew restless. Time pressed in. The wedding could not remain paused forever. People began glancing toward the church, toward the sun climbing higher in the sky. Yet no one moved to end the standoff. Curiosity and unease held them fast. The bride felt caught between two futures. One where she stepped back into the role expected of her, grateful for any scrap of acceptance. Another where she allowed this moment to change her, to challenge the silence she had lived within. Both paths frightened her. The rancher's voice softened again, but his words did not lose their edge. He spoke of dignity, of how it was not something given by others, but something that had to be recognized. He said that laughter at another's pain revealed more about the one laughing than the one who fell. Somewhere in the crowd, someone laughed nervously, then stopped. The sound felt wrong now, out of place. The bride felt tears gather, but she did not let them fall. She stood straighter, feeling the ground beneath her boots, feeling her own weight, not as a burden, but as proof she was real and present. The moment demanded something of her, though she was still not sure what. As the rancher's words settled, the tension did not break. It thickened, stretched, waiting. The town stood on the edge of something it did not yet understand. The bride felt that edge beneath her feet, uncertain and sharp. Then still nothing was resolved. The stillness pressed down harder than the heat. Even the birds seemed to have gone quiet, as if the land itself was listening. The bride felt the weight of every second as it passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Her heart beat so loudly she wondered if others could hear it. She stood between the rancher and the groom, between what had been and what might come next, unsure where she truly belonged. The older man took another step forward, his boots firm, his presence meant to command. He spoke again, this time more sharply, reminding everyone that a wedding was sacred, that order must be kept. He warned that moments like this could turn ugly if pushed too far. His gaze flicked to the rancher, then to the bride, as if measuring how much trouble each might bring. A few people nodded eagerly, relieved to cling to something familiar. Others shifted uncomfortably, torn between agreement and doubt. The split widened, visible now in the way people stood and who edged closer to whom. The town had never been united, but rarely had the cracks been so clearly exposed. The groom cleared his throat again, louder this time, said they should continue, that everyone had seen enough. His words felt rushed, brittle. The bride turned to him slowly. She saw the strain in his face, the fear of judgment, the desire to smooth things over and move on. She also saw something else, something she had avoided naming before. He wanted the moment to disappear more than he wanted to understand it. Her chest tightened. She thought of the life ahead, of mornings and evenings shaped by silence, by small compromises that slowly grew heavier. She wondered how many times she would be expected to laugh off hurt, to keep peace at her own expense. The thought made her stomach churn. The rancher did not interrupt. He watched the exchange closely, as if the answer to something important rested there. His presence remained steady, grounding, but he did not speak for her. That choice hung between them, unspoken but powerful. A murmur rippled again through the crowd. Some urged the groom on. Others watched the bride with new curiosity, as if waiting to see whether she would shrink back or step forward. She felt exposed in a way she never had before, stripped of the careful distance she usually kept. Her hands clenched in her skirts, as the fabric felt rough, real. She drew in a breath that tasted of dust and sweat and sunlight. For years she had survived by enduring. Now endurance felt like surrender. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Fear surged.
Oh, what if she spoke and made everything worse?
What if the rancher regretted stepping in? What if the town turned on her completely, the risks stacked up heavy and unforgiving?
Oh.
A sudden sound cut through her thoughts. A laugh, short and sharp, from somewhere behind. It was quickly silenced, but the damage was done. Heat flared in her chest, anger finally burning through the fear. She realized then that no matter what she did, the moment had already changed her. There was no returning to before. The rancher sensed the shift. He stepped slightly back, giving her space, his eyes meeting hers. There was no pressure in them, only trust. That trust felt dangerous and precious all at once. She took one small step forward. The movement was subtle, but it drew every eye. Her voice shook when she finally spoke, but it carried. She did not accuse, she did not plead. She spoke of falling, of how it felt to lie there and hear laughter. She spoke of carrying more than her body, of carrying years of quiet judgment. Her words were simple, unpolished, and they landed harder because of it. The crowd listened, stunned. No one interrupted. The older man's mouth tightened. The groom stared, something like shock flickering across his face. The rancher remained still, watching her with an intensity that made her feel braver. As she spoke, memories surfaced. Small moments that had shaped her, moments she had never shared. She did not tell them all, but enough. enough to make the air feel heavier, charged. She finished with a question, not loud, not dramatic. She asked whether kindness was truly such a heavy burden to carry. Silence followed, deep and absolute. The wind stirred again, softer this time, brushing against her veil. She felt exposed, but oddly lighter, as if setting the words free had loosened something tight inside her. She did not know what would come of it, but she knew she could not take them back. The older man looked around, searching for support. He found less than he expected. Some faces had hardened, but others had softened. Doubt had crept in, unwelcome and stubborn. He warned that this kind of talk could unravel things, that order depended on everyone knowing their place. The rancher finally spoke again, his voice calm, but edged with steel. He said order built on fear was already broken. He said a town was judged not by how it treated the strong, but by how it treated those who fell. The words hung there undeniable. The groom shifted, torn. He looked at the bride, truly looked, perhaps for the first time without the filter of expectation. Something flickered in his eyes, regret or realization, she could not tell. He took a half step toward her, then stopped, uncertain. The crowd grew restless once more. Time pressed in harder. The sun climbed, the church bell stood silent but expectant. This moment could not stretch forever, yet no one knew how to end it. A woman near the back spoke up quietly, then another. Their voices were hesitant, but they carried. They spoke of times they had laughed when they should not have, of moments they wished they could take back. The older man bristled, his authority slipping. The tension thickened, pulling tighter from every direction. The bride felt it like a held breath, the instant before something breaks. She did not know whether the town would turn or tear itself apart. She only knew she was standing at the center of it, no longer invisible. The rancher stepped closer to her again, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. He did not touch her this time. He did not need to. The message was clear. He was still there. Voices rose, overlapped, then quieted again. The balance wavered. The older man's face flushed deeper, anger and fear mixing. He warned again of consequences, of lines being crossed that could not be uncrossed. The bride's heart raced. She sensed the climax approaching, the moment when everything would tip one way or another. She glanced at the road, at the wagon, at the town she had known all her life. She wondered which version of it would remain after today. The air felt charged, like a storm about to break. And still, the final word had not been spoken. The pressure in the air grew heavier, as if the ground itself were waiting for a verdict. The bride felt her pulse in her ears, each beat echoing the uncertainty around her. She had spoken, and there was no taking it back. Whatever happened next would shape not just this day, but the way she would walk these streets for years to come. The older man drew himself up, straightening his coat as if to remind everyone who he was. He spoke of respect, of elders, of how things had always been done. His words rolled out, practiced and firm, but beneath them ran a thin edge of worry. He could feel the crowd slipping from his grasp. Order here had always depended on quiet agreement, and that agreement was fraying. The rancher watched him without blinking. He seemed rooted to the earth, like one of the old trees that survived storms simply by standing their ground. The bride sensed that his calm, unsettled people more than shouting ever could. Calm meant certainty, and certainty left little room to dismiss him. Behind them, the wagon horses shifted again, uneasy. The creak of leather and wood sounded too loud. The bride glanced back at the wagon, at the path she had ridden into this moment. It felt like a lifetime ago. She wondered if she would ever climb back onto it, or if the road ahead would demand something entirely different of her. The groom took another step forward, finally placing himself beside her. His presence was tentative, like someone unsure of his footing. He spoke softly, almost pleading, asking if they could finish the ceremony, if they could leave this behind and start fresh. His eyes searched hers, hopeful and afraid. She wanted to answer him kindly. She wanted to believe that starting fresh was possible, without facing what had already happened. But the laughter still rang in her memory, sharp and cutting. She realized that moving on without reckoning would mean carrying that sound with her forever. She did not reply right away. The silence between them stretched, filled with everything she could not yet say. A man from the edge of the crowd muttered something about people being too sensitive these days. Another nodded. A woman nearby snapped back that kindness was not weakness. Voices overlapped, rising and falling, tension spilling into the open now. The town felt like it was arguing with itself, old habits clashing with new awareness. The bride felt dizzy. She shifted her weight, grounding herself. The rancher noticed and subtly positioned himself so she could lean if she needed. That quiet support steadied her more than any words. The older man raised his voice, calling for calm. He warned that if this continued, consequences would follow. He spoke of work withheld, of favors forgotten, of how fragile livelihoods could be here. The threat was clear, even if unspoken. The bride's stomach twisted. She knew how easily people could suffer for crossing invisible lines. She glanced at the rancher, worry flickering through her. She did not want him punished for standing up for her. She wondered if he understood the weight of what he challenged. Yet his expression did not change. If anything, his resolve seemed to deepen. He spoke again, reminding the crowd that fear had always been used to keep people in place. He said that did not make it right. His voice did not waver. The words landed like stones dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward. A hush followed, thicker than before. Even those who disagreed seemed unsure how to respond. The bride felt the moment tightening, like a rope drawn taut. Something had to give. She noticed faces she had never really seen before. The quiet shop girl who avoided attention, the farmhand who kept his head down, the older woman whose eyes had always held a trace of sadness. She wondered how many of them carried their own silent wounds, how many times they had laughed along just to survive. The groom shifted again, frustration creeping in. He whispered that this was tearing everything apart. His words hurt, not because they were cruel, but because they revealed how differently they saw the world. To him, peace meant quiet. To her, quiet had meant pain. The church bell began to toll in the distance, a single slow note that cut through the tension. Ashi. It was a reminder of time passing, of expectations waiting. The sound sent a ripple through the crowd. Some glanced toward the church, anxious. Others stayed fixed on the scene before them, unwilling to look away. The bride felt tears sting her eyes again, but she blinked them back. She had cried enough in private. She would not cry now, not when she had finally found her voice. A young boy near the front tugged at his mother's sleeve and asked why everyone was angry. The simple question struck harder than any accusation. The mother hushed him quickly, face flushed. The bride felt her heart ache. She wondered what lessons were being passed down in this moment, what stories would be told later. The older man's patience snapped. He accused the rancher of turning a simple accident into a spectacle. He said the bride was being used to make a point. The words cut deep. The bride flinched, anger flaring hot and sharp. Before the rancher could respond, she spoke again. Her voice was steadier this time. She said she was not anyone's tool. She said she knew exactly what she was doing. The crowd fell silent once more. Even the older man seemed taken aback. She felt exposed all over again, but also stronger. Each word she spoke seemed to claim a piece of herself she had long given away. The rancher nodded slightly, a gesture of respect. He did not interrupt. He did not correct her. He let her stand in her own truth. The groom looked at her as if seeing her anew, uncertainty deepening. He asked quietly whether she still wanted to marry him. The question hung between them, raw and unguarded. The crowd leaned in, sensing the weight of it. Her heart pounded. She was not ready to answer that. Not here. Not like this. She asked for time, her voice barely above a whisper. The request felt like a cliff edge, a pause before a fall. The bell rang again, louder now, insistent. The town felt suspended between breaths. The rancher stepped slightly back, giving her space once more. His presence remained, but the choice was hers. The older man seized on the moment, declaring that this indecision proved his point. He urged the crowd to move on, to leave this unrest behind. Some began to shift, torn between curiosity and relief. The bride looked around, taking it all in. The road, the faces, the dust swirling in the sunlight. She felt the weight of every eye, every expectation. Then the moment trembled, balanced on a knife's edge. The tension coiled tighter, ready to snap. And just as it felt unbearable, just as something seemed about to break, everything hung suspended, waiting for the next move.